So this is
Cool.
Problematics by Gaudior. It is rated teen for graphic depictions of violence. Um, it's just Kankuri and the Signless talking. It's canonical character death, canon typical violence, philosophy, dream bubbles, triggers, swearing, social justice. Kankuri is the unreliablest narrator. It is him. God, this sure was written in 2013. Okay.
hmm
And the summary is, but perhaps, you think, stirring your suddenly stilled feet into action, this is an opportunity. You have spoken many times to your group about the problematic nature of your Alternian counterpart's methods. Surely, therefore, it behooves you to take the time, not just to attempt to analyze and deconstruct his words in absentia, but to actually call out the source of the toxic rhetoric in person. In fact, you have often mused about what you would say to him, how you would demonstrate to him his misconceptions and contradictorily kyriarchy enforcing methodology. You had not anticipated the reality of the situation coming upon you so suddenly, but, you suppose, no time like the present, especially since he's spotted you. So you remind yourself that while your own unexamined, societally instilled reactions may raise their metaphorical heads at unfortunate times, it's important not to let your acknowledgement of them prevent you from educating others on the important issues and walk towards them. In which Cancri Vantis, social justice activist extraordinaire, engages in a dialogue with his other universe counterpart. This is. This is. Hmm. This really was made in like 2013. Yeah, this really was made in like 2013.
Yeah.
Alright, are you ready, Kelso? Oh, wait, I need to blow this up because this is fucking tiny.
Yeah, it's tiny. And the microphone is.
And the microphone is. Can I? I can't.
Oh. Whoa. Whoa.
Well, that's the back of the mic. Wait.
Lotus flower.
Yeah, how's that?
Wow.
Now it's actually now the mic is right side up for the first time since I've set it up.
Oh,
Gonna-
that's probably
Yeah, I
useful.
did that.
It's I don't know. It's the boom is way easier to set up with it upside down.
Yeah, I like this. It's nice. Okay.
All right. I'll put that there. Whenever you are ready, Kelsor.
Okay. You're walking calmly, breathing evenly. It's obvious that Porum needs some time and space to take in and accept what you've just told her, and there's nothing wrong with that. It's often difficult for people to question their own, admittedly problematic, socialized beliefs and assumptions. It may be necessary to present an idea to them many times before they're able to deconstruct and set aside their innate prejudices. It would be a failure on your part to not give her the opportunity she needs to take in these new, perhaps challenging, understandings of her own unexamined privilege. You can be patient with her difficulties. And so you're walking slowly, unhurriedly, without any particular urgency, away from where she is. The just finished conversation replays itself in your mind as you walk, and while it is difficult for you to not turn back when you realize ways in which your phrasing was perhaps difficult for her to grasp, given her still elementary understanding of the topic, you remind her that this temporary pause will, in the long run, lead to more productive work. In fact, it gives you a useful opportunity to polish your rhetoric, to revise each phrase that led to that particularly unfortunate expression on her face. It's true that she remains a particularly challenging individual to educate, and that you sometimes feel a certain wariness as the sweeps continue without any sign of her becoming enlightened. But you don't believe that burnout has yet overcome you. You will simply try again, later. Right now, though, you interrupt your musings about how to describe the way your hetero human normativity can affect even those in the OJA community to wonder where you are. You vaguely notice the golds of prospect fading away as you walked, calmly, but the cool gold of desert sand under the moons, while similar enough to not have caught your attention, is unfamiliar. It shifts underfoot, impeding your progress, and you're surprised that when you look back to realize how far you've gotten from the parts of the dream bubble you know. It's odd to have found an area of the bubble where you've never been, odder still that when you recall that you never heard Latula or any of the more far-ranging members of your cohort describe traveling here. You suppose it may be a memory of one of your ancestors or their human companions, and the prospect of being able to spend more time educating Karkat is an enticing one. You devote more energy to exploring this unchanged landscape, watching dunes stretch away in the distance, the moon creating sparkly outlined burgundy and jade shadows. It's hard to judge time here and now. The sensations tend to be hazier than when you remember before your unfortunate passing. You have a sense that in your previous phase of existence, your every moment was full of more sensation than you could possibly process. But that now, only the sorts of things that you, or whoever's memory created this part of the bubble, consciously notice are there to greet your senses. So your solitary trek through the desert seems oddly timeless, as if whoever remembers this and something occupying his heart thoughts too much to notice details of how long he had been walking, how tired he might be. You're aware that this is more physical effort than you are accustomed to. You reject the ableist and body-shaming rhetoric regarding exercise, weight, and appearance. But the memory of this dream bubble doesn't include weariness, so you don't feel it. This existence in which you find yourself certainly does offer fascinating opportunities to walk in another's footsteps, so to speak. Though you must admit finding actual footprints would be helpful guides through this cold, empty desert. Silence save for your breath and sand shuffling away from your tread. You are encouraged by the flicker of firelight ahead of you. The opportunity for dialogue would certainly be enlivening after the unfortunate time you've spent alone here. You redouble your efforts at making your way through the impending sand, mentally rehearsing your lecture. You're certain that Karkat's attentive audience will be more fulfilling for both of you than the seemingly endless march through the dim, soundless night. And so it is very pleasant when you recognize that oh so familiar set of unconventionally attractive horns against the firelight. As you approach through, you're taken aback to realize your error. The featureless desert confused you in terms of scale, rather than being the few sweeps younger form of your ancestor. This person is actually considerably taller than you, adult height. And you've never seen Karkat wear anything other than a simple black sweater and pants, so the tattered gray cloak is confusing. It takes a few disappointing moments to realize that no, this is not your willing pupil. It takes a few more moments for you to realize who it must, therefore, be. Well, this is unexpected, but on the other hand, you think, stirring your suddenly stilled feet into action, perhaps this is an opportunity. You've spoken many times to your group about the problematic nature of your Alternian counterparts' methods. Surely, therefore, it behooves you to take the time, not just to attempt to analyze and deconstruct his words in absentia, but to actually call out the source of the toxic rhetoric in person. In fact, you have often mused about what you would say to him, how you would demonstrate to him his misconceptions and contradictory hierarchy reinforcing methodology. You had not anticipated the reality of the situation coming upon you so suddenly, but you suppose no time like the present, especially since he spotted you. There's no point in doing anything but continuing forward, disciplining your body language to present a warm yet confident demeanor. He's studying you, silent, and it's hard to read what he's thinking from the intensity of his gaze, the slight quirk of his lips. You remind yourself that while your own unexamined, societally instilled reactions may raise their metaphorical heads at unfortunate times, it's important not to let your acknowledgement of them prevent you from engaging in productive dialogue. So you clear your throat and begin.
Am I right in thinking I'm addressing the soundless, also known, however problematically, as the sufferer?
His expression gets even harder to read.
So they tell me.
Excellent.
You say, because it is excellent that you have this opportunity, and it would be a failure of you as a leader and as an activist to let it slip away.
I'm delighted for this opportunity to engage in dialogue with you. As you may know, you have become a figure of reverence for many people, both in your iteration of the revised universe as well as those of my cohort in the pre-scratch one. As such, I feel that you have a responsibility to your followers, if you will, to examine your methodology in greater depth with an eye towards the, well, I like to use the term problematic lightly, and while I quite respect and even agree with your goals of peace, equality, and a truly spectre-blind society, it seems to me that you might wish to consider whether the effects of some of your tactics not only reinforce the very power structure that you, at least on the face of it, were attempted to subvert, but also perhaps contradictorily, and I by no means mean to imply that this was your intention, by your very so-called last sermon, may have actually reinforced the very violence, both verbal as well as of course the unfortunate physical tactics which are so often used to reinforce privilege in both of our universes.
He stares at you for a long moment, and you would take advantage of this listening pause to continue your lecture, but you find yourself unaccountably lost for words, unable to remember clearly the narrative arc of the argument, despite all of your past brainstorming on the topic.
Kid.
He says
Who
finally.
who the fuck are you talking to?
You smile compassionately, pleased for the opportunity to educate even the supposedly brilliant iteration of yourself.
I apologize. I assumed, and this is an example of my own unexamined privilege to perform such a microaggression, that as a fellow activist you would be conversant with the rhetoric of problematics. I would be very happy to educate you in this area so that we may continue the conversation on more equal footing, if you will pardon the possibly ableist imagery.
He shakes his head.
No, I got what you meant. You're saying that I got pissed off when they were fucking torturing me to death and did the same kind of shit I've been preaching against, and that makes me a hypocrite. Fair enough, but you're not looking at me when you're talking.
You stammer. You actually stammer. What's wrong with you?
No,
You take a deep breath.
It's true that neurotypical society values eye contact during speech, and while I do not personally identify as neuroatypical, I must nonetheless protest your enforcing of the rigid societal enforcement of neurotypical privilege and the false norms that such enforcement implies.
He thinks about that for a moment.
So, you're not looking at me because it bothers you.
I must protest.
You say, and it takes you a moment to figure out what you're protesting. Just that you are, but then you have it, you know you're all right.
Your assumption that my acting as an ally for a disadvantaged community is in some way a form of oversensitivity on my part, as opposed to the very basic troll or indeed sentient being. I don't wish to portray my own privilege as part of an ancient species, but the basic decency is that any sentient being should feel toward his oppressed, or should I say less privileged, or should I say any person at any place, any other person at any place on the hierarchy.
That one got away from you a little.
He comments. He gestures to a warm piece of cloth laid on the ground near the fire, like the one he's sitting on.
Want to have a seat?
You don't, really. His adult height is already far enough above you without giving him his added advantage. But you remind yourself that a key step to engaging in productive dialogue is to approach the individual in question on his own terms, as much as is possible without, by your very doing so, reinforcing problematic norms. You sit. The cloth is scratchy and rough beneath you, and little padding against the sand. The fire crackles, though the breeze at least carries the smoke away from you. You look up at the other universe iteration, the flickering firelight playing over his face, glinting in his eyes. He leans back on his elbows, his head once again just barely below yours.
Are you okay?
He asks. You bristle.
If you're implying that my very valid socio-political views are simply a form of irrational emotion, I will ask you to check your privilege, as the use of such a tone argument is simply the unthinking defense of a person who cannot address the logic of the case being presented to him, and so must resort to ad hominem attacks to avoid the conversation.
He actually laughs. The extremely problematic and unthinkingly privileged individual.
Oh, wait, I'm sorry. Who's avoiding the question here?
He sighs.
I'm not saying anything about your politics. I'm saying you look like you're freaking the fuck out. So is it something I'm doing, or did something happen before you got here?
Before you go casting aspersions of me,
You growl.
you may want to consider whether or not your own actions have a problematic bent which may at least be partially responsible for the socio-political situation in which you found yourself.
Yes.
He says.
Like I just said, right?
Sarcasm
You tell him.
is the last defense of those who are incapable of bringing themselves to honestly engage with the concepts under discussion.
Ah,
He says.
so you're not seeing me or hearing me. That's great. Why are we having this conversation?
You glare at him. Well, study him attentively, at any rate.
Because I need to help you examine your rhetoric.
Oh,
He says.
well, sure.
He chuckles.
You're Vantus. Vantus is always no better than everyone else, right? Sure, help me examine my rhetoric. Thank you.
You aren't so easily lulled, though. Something about him is troubling you, and you're just not sure about the sincerity of his request.
You want my help?
I do.
He says.
Let's see.
I've been wanting your... Yeah. I don't know if you got swallowed. I've been wanting your help forever.
You draw a breath to rebuke him, to point out that you don't need his mockery, but he doesn't stop talking.
But since I'm all unenlightened and ass backwards and shit, maybe you could do me a favor.
If your intention is to mock,
He shakes his head.
No, fuck no. Really not. I'm here for a reason, right? And I have been wanting to talk to you for a long time. So no, I'm being serious.
You hesitate.
very well. I'll be happy to make any reasonable accommodations that will meet your needs.
Oh, good.
He says.
Okay, so please, tell me about what's wrong with my rhetoric. But just for me, could you do it all in words of one syllable?
You stand up, stiff with the desert cold.
I should have known. You've obviously been toying with my perfectly sincere efforts for your own amusement without the slightest intention of listening.
You don't need this. There are other people to talk to. People who will be more receptive to your teaching, or at least won't make fun of you, or at least if they do, it'll be in a way that you can just know is their own defensiveness. Not that you don't think this mockery is his own defensiveness. You're sure that what's going on here, there's nothing else it could reasonably be. This isn't... You don't need to feel so unsettled. This is just a conversation like any other. Except for being less productive, so you would be perfectly justified in enforcing your own boundaries and escaping. And leaving the conversation in a dignified way.
No.
He snarls, only it's not a threat, just anger. You don't know how he's doing that.
Please, Cankry, I want to talk to you. I want to hear what you have to say.
He looks up at you, wide eyes imploring. You can see him seeing even through your dead blankness.
Please, just try it. You know I've spent a lot of time talking to people, right? I really do think it'll help. Just try. Please.
You look down at him. This person who could have been you in another time. You owe him, you think, and then start to question that thought. It's an illusion to think that any one person, no matter how privileged, could genuinely repay all of the injustices suffered by another. And your purpose is not, no matter how one might argue, to do more than to help others to gain enlightenment. He clears his throat.
All right.
You say. You turn to his side, graciously sitting down to show your willingness to engage in the dialogue.
If you think it'll help you.
You take a deep breath, thinking about it. This is a challenge, but you don't think it's beyond your abilities. You've endured worse than this before in trying to educate Matuna or rhetoric save you, Kurlos.
I would suggest that you stop.
You notice your error and he shrugs.
I think you should not tell your...
Followers, hearers, people?
You
He suggests.
think I should not tell you that?
You don't like it, but that's not quite the point.
I think you should not tell us that we should use...
Violent. Violent means violence, swearing.
I think that you should not tell us to swear and hurt people in order to...
He shakes his head, and you can't handle this. It shouldn't be that difficult a challenge.
You should not tell us to swear and fight because it will not work. It is better, fine, more good to use means which are more wise. To talk to people, to talk to us.
He nods.
Yep,
He says,
I see that. But they hurt me, and I got mad.
your mind goes blank.
But
You say, you're sure of that part.
just to be mad is not good. It will hurt. You need to be nice or they won't listen, won't hear you. So if you get mad, you will hurt them and they will hurt you back, and all the bad people... let's see.
Oh, that's a ridiculous oversimplification to call someone bad. It completely ignores the circumstances and their social conditioning in it.
You're just like them, and you can't teach anyone with any being true trust. They won't.
You hiss through your teeth in frustration. You have an easier time of it if he hadn't been imposed this handicap, which is a very problematic thought of you to have. It's as much as celebrating your own privilege. That's a terribly ableist thought on your part. And you need to remember that even though you might be coming from a less powerful position on the hemo spectrum, that in no way negates from your own privilege. In fact, your uniquely underprivileged privilege may well be preventing you from noting and checking on your own,
Cancry,
he says.
you still with me?
Yes.
You say.
Of course. Pardon me, I was taking a moment to recalibrate my examination of privilege.
He frowns, and you can see his disappointment, his loss of faith in your abilities when you can't even complete the very simple task he's set you to. Even though it might seem illogical to think of him setting you tasks, he's hardly your superior. You are, after all, the same person, even if he spent more years in the living state and had different experiences. But it's important to dismiss your own experience, even if it might mean that because of your privilege, you need to be certain that, as a good ally, you aren't demanding recognition and praise for your efforts. Far from it, of course. You wouldn't dream of imposing your narrative on someone elsewhere in the hemospectrum, or in other circumstances that would be more problematic of you. And you're not going to do that. So, you will continue this lecture. Even an idiotic, no damn it, that was ableist. You are being shockingly ableist today. You're not sure why. It's not as if you have reason to or to be more prone to ableism than concilinormativity or concupiscinormativity or, of course, hemospectrism, let alone speciesism. He shifts his weight toward, and your eyes are drawn unwillingly to his wrists. to the thick scars there, pale and flickering in the firelight, which you suppose, of course, the unfortunate incident surrounding his unfortunate transition to your current state. Not that that in itself isn't problematic, but still, does he have to flash them around? Oh, merciful problematics. How silencing and discounting could you get? You don't know what's happening in your head today. You don't know, you can't.
Kangry!
He exclaims, and you dodge the scarred hand coming at you before you realize he's trying to touch your shoulder to get your attention. He pulls back, looks down at you.
Kangry, kid, what are you so scared of?
You straighten yourself up for dignity as best as you can.
It's not. I can't.
That's not very dignified.
It's not reasonable of you to continue this conversation under these circumstances. I'm very concerned that I may inadvertently trigger you, so I feel it would be best to conclude.
He looks distressed.
You want to run away.
Taking precautions around triggering is not running away. Far from it. It is simply a way of allowing the conversation to continue on a respectful and meaningful level, rather than allowing microaggressions, nay, let me say full-on macroaggressions, or perhaps simply aggressions, to impede the conversation.
Okay.
He says, softly.
Okay, kid. Okay. Why don't you tell me what triggers are? I haven't heard that term before.
Triggers?
You're surprised. That seems so basic, but you can certainly manage that.
A trigger is a reminder, whether spoken or written, of an event, situation, system, or concept which causes significant traumatic distress to the person who is triggered. It can lead to traumatic reactions, which of course can be anything from verbal or physical violence to more internal expressions of affect.
Huh.
He says.
So, how do you think you'll trigger me?
You hadn't expected that.
Well,
You begin.
of course, there were a number of situations in which you experienced in your life, starting of course, with our shared off-spectrum hemotype and the many institutionally enforced systems of oppression related to it, and leading, of course, to the, well, as you know, there were many ways in which your life was less than utopian, though I do protest that those who claim that Bedford was an actual utopia were fooling themselves and so simply reinforce.
Oh, shit.
He says.
I'm sorry, this isn't gonna work. You're just gonna curl back up into your shell. And you're not gonna tell me a damn thing that's true, are you?
It takes you a moment, for some reason, to come up with an answer.
I'm trying to explain my perspective to you, to the best of my ability. I understand that this can be a challenging subject of conversation, and I'm trying to be sensitive to your own triggers and difficulties, but I do think it would work better if you would be more willing to listen to a different perspective.
He says.
I see.
He takes a deep breath, and then he leans forward. His face right in front of yours, so thin compared to yours, or even Carcat's. Drawn and hollow, adult long and strong-featured, and you can see marks on his lips where he bit through them.
Situations, huh? Like the situation where they strung me up with red-hot irons in front of everyone in the Empire and flogged me until my back was nothing but mutant meat and shot me until I died screaming. That the situation you're talking about?
The desert sands are shifting underneath your feet, more than before, because you're stumbling. Falling to your knees and scrambling back up, sand biting at your hands, embedded itself under your claws, coughing into your throat and nose and eyes, which are already stinging wet through the red haze of the world around you, shifting and struggling to run. You fall, again. And it's not just the desert now. The dream bubble shifting around you. You're surrounded by trolls on all sides of you, chanting and laughing and screaming for mutant red blood. The jet creaks under the weight. There are arrows flying through the air, and you can hear the Mulian wail in horror and grief and fury, hear Porum's soft sobbing, and you're tired and hurt, and you struggle, you run, crashing into walls of the arena, and there are stars swimming above you, and everything's red and stinging and bad. You keep running, keep falling, can't find an exit, just run from side to side, trying so hard not to see the only thing to see here, the jet above you, trying not to smell flesh cooked by hot iron. You don't know what you're saying until you finally fall for the last time, panting and whimpering, and you hear what's coming out of your mouth as,
Sorry, I'm sorry.
He kneels down next to you in the dirt, close enough to touch, but makes no move towards you.
It's okay.
You curl up, clutching at your knees with torn and gritty claws.
No.
You close your eyes, the filthy dirt of the arena floor sticking to your wet face, and he doesn't understand, doesn't get it.
I hurt you.
He still doesn't understand, and his voice doesn't quite hold the humor he's going for. It is too hollow. Blood drips from his wrists.
Pretty sure that was the Conde's soldiers, actually.
No.
He has to understand. You have to make him understand.
I was the leader. I was the one who was responsible when we decided to scratch the session, when we made the universe the one you lived in. We made your world, and we made it be harsh and horrible, and we made everything that happened to you. We did that. I did that. Just so that we could win a stupid game. That's it. I made your world be like that. You got hurt, tortured, you died, and it was because I couldn't lead us to win a stupid video game. Because I couldn't get us to work together enough to do anything but lose and decide that we could never win. Because I was such a bad leader that no one else could imagine any way we could do it. I hurt you. I created the world that hurt you, so it would hurt you. Just and only because I failed. I failed them. I failed you. And you died. And I'm so...
The word sticks in your mouth for all that you just shouted it to unhearing skies above.
I regret. I didn't intend.
I know.
He says. He's sitting right in front of you and you don't want him to touch you. You hate it when people touch you, and he knows it somehow, so he doesn't. He just looks at you and you wish you could have seen his eyes before he died, before you got him killed. Because maybe if you could see his expression better, if you could really look into his eyes, maybe you'd know what he wants from you.
I remember.
You can't get the words out to answer him, choking and grasping too much to be clear. He just sits with you while the arena fades away again and the green moon sets on the horizon. The desert sands going from gold to dimmer red in the Tyrian moon's light. The stars move above you, constellations different all that time ago, and you sob and cry and try to get your breath back.
You remember?
Being you.
He says.
Something about the blood, I think. But that's why I preached what I did. I remembered you. I remembered your world and your friends. I remembered playing the game, and I remembered the choice you made at the end. I know, Cankry. I know.
Something about the way he says it.
What's your hatch name?
He smiles at you.
Cankry.
He says.
Cankry Vantis. It's nice to finally meet you.
Okay, I think that's a good spot to stop. I think we skipped
Yeah,
over
that's... Yeah.
bit where we were originally gonna stop, but yeah, there's.
Oopsie.
I mean, it's a good fic.
Yeah. And this is like two-thirds the way through, so we got through like 4,000 words probably, which is good.
Yeah. Yeah, we'll finish it next week. I just don't want to do the whole thing all at once because we have several other fics that we want to do, and you guys will just have to tune in next week for the rest.